And welcome back to the Media Box. I'm joined now by Stewart Dickson, co-rapporteur on recurring issues in monitoring and election observation missions. Welcome to the Media Box.
Thank you.
Stewart, lovely to have you. Now, in the report, you've analysed all the findings from all reports adopted by the Congress over the past 5 years, distilling trends in local democracy across Europe. Now, could you explain to us what are the main challenges that local and regional authorities are currently facing, and have new challenges emerged, or have the existing issues just intensified?
Okay, well, yes, going back over that period of time, and for me, somewhat longer than that, when I started election observations, probably over 10 years ago now for Congress, it was obvious to us that in the first few missions that we did, that I was involved in, that you would see things happening at elections. You would see family voting, you would see poor secrecy of ballot, you would see disability access to polling stations very restricted. And then the problem has been that every time since we've gone back to do further elections, quite often in the same member state, despite the fact that we have done a very open and honest report suggesting that they make these changes, it's been very difficult to get those changes embedded in member states. There are some very good examples of where member states will take our report and they will examine it and they will take very quick action on the recommendations that we made, but there are other member states struggle to take on board the recommendations which we have. Looking forward, I think there are lots of new challenges, particularly around things like electronic voting, which is somewhat on the rise. So there's a lot of voter concern about the security of that. And its potential to be interfered with on a global scale. It seems to us that there are some states quite like the idea of e-voting, electronic voting systems, but the reality is, though in order to have them and to provide the appropriate level of security, they are incredibly expensive, substantially more than a piece of paper and a pen, which works perfectly well in a polling station, provided you have basics in place. Privacy to vote, a transparent ballot box so you can see the ballot papers going in, a good quality voters list where people are the people who live in the community for which they're voting for.
Now, the recommendation deplores the fact that member states didn't systematically invite the Congress to observe local and regional elections over the reference period. So can you explain to us why it is important that the Congress receives more systematic invitations?
Yeah. There is an obligation on member states to invite us to observe their local and regional elections, but it's not mandated. It's not a must. You shall, and therefore a number of things happen. Some member states are very resistant to anybody from the outside coming in and looking or observing their election processes. I find that very disappointing, because if you claim to be a democracy, you should be a very open democracy, and you should welcome people in to do that. There are other member states who, for political reasons, while they're open to inviting us in, quite often do it at the last moment. Instead of, we know in many member states today, a year away when a local or regional election will take place, and we can receive an invitation, and that allows us to plan and to put together an independent expert and the appropriate people to do an election mission. But if you're only invited 5 or 6 weeks before an election, that makes the logistics very difficult.
Would you say going forward there should be a sort of initiative to allow everything to be organised well in advance for all local and regional elections?
Absolutely. If I were being completely honest, I would say that it should be a mandatory requirement of every member state that they issue an invitation. Now, clearly we wouldn't accept every invitation. And I think there's another misapprehension that what might be described as stable democracies, the bigger, older member states, that we don't need to go to them. Well, actually we do. And I've been to some of those bigger, older, stable states, and we still see problems and difficulties. And quite often you will go, and I'm not saying which country, but recently we observed elections in a very large, stable state where disability access was incredibly poor. And yet that state would say that it was at the advanced edge of technology in Europe, but they couldn't provide appropriate disability access to polling stations. So we can see bad and poor practice in some new and emerging states, but equally well we can see poor practices in some of the older states as well.
Yeah, it does indeed sound like there is some changes to be made. That is Stewart Dickson, co-rapporteur on recurring issues in monitoring and election observation missions. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Mediabox.
Thank you.